Hey everyone, Doug here, Doug Johnson Productions, Orem, Utah. So, the question of the day. Am I still happy with the cameras that I got, or am I considering updating? I'm talking a little bit today about some of the cameras that Sony introduced within the last couple months, and what's cool about them, what I don't like about them. Would they be worth upgrading to? Are they so similar to what I've already got that it wouldn't make any sense? So, anybody who watches this channel regularly knows that I use the Sony Pxw Z150 as my primary camera, and for the most part, I actually really like the camera. It's a 4K camera. It's got a fantastic quality image coming out of it. Just a great camera in a small package. It's got that nice 1-inch, which for a camcorder is huge, sensor, which is great in low light, and because of the clear image zoom feature, it has the zoom capability that goes out to 24 times, which is quite a range. Like 24 times zoom is pretty wide and allows you to cover a lot of different situations. So it's a great all-around camera, and the fact that it's got SDI connectivity and can output 1080 and still record 4K internally, lots of cool features there. However, it's not perfect. There's some little quirks about it. And so, are those quirks enough to push me over the edge to purchase some of the newer cameras that Sony has announced? So this is the Z150 that I've had. This camera came out just a little less than 2 years ago. I actually pre-ordered one, so got one of the very first ones that ever came out. And as mentioned, I've been very happy with it, especially with a firmware upgrade that it received last summer, which added HDR capabilities through the hybrid log gamma feature. And some other nifty features that they've added to it. I've been very happy with it. Now, another camera that I use, which is very similar, even though it's in a different form factor, is this Pxw X70. And this is actually the one that I have here sitting on the desk. So, the two cameras are very similar. So, a couple differences, though. First of all, this one has what they call the Exmor Rs Sensor in it, and the Z150 has an Exmor Rs. The S in there stands for stacked, which is a technology that they use in order to get a faster readout from the image sensor. And that faster readout means less rolling shutter, means you get things like 120 frames per second. Basically, it's faster readout. It gives the camera some additional capabilities that this one does not have. They're both 4K, both produce a stunning image, but the Z150 is a little more modern, and they have some newer technologies in there. Now, the new cameras that Sony introduced a few months ago are based on this X70 with features from the Z150 thrown in, and then a few upgrades besides. So, I'll actually go over here to the Z90 page. If you look at it, it looks identical to the X70, and from the fact at a glance, you'd never be able to tell the two apart. They're very, very similar. It's basically the same body, just with updated internals. I'll scroll down a little bit here. So we'll talk about some of the things that they've added to it. So, and notice here the Z90 has the same same type of technologies, Exmor Rs Sensor in it that the Z150 has. Again, as mentioned, this sensor is fantastic in low light. I've really liked the low light capabilities of these cameras. They work really well in situations where other cameras that I've used, which wouldn't produce an image at all. Very low noise because of their huge size, so I'm able to bump up to 15, 18 decibels a gain without starting to get significant noise in the image, which my old cameras, no way, no how. So that's a cool feature. Now, the one thing that they've actually added to the Z90 and its related siblings is phase detect autofocus in the sensor. So if you've used the Canon digital SLR cameras that have what Canon calls dual pixel AF, same idea. So effectively what they're doing is they're able to split the pixels and receive and process the information from those two split pixels separately, and they're able to determine by the phase of the light coming through the lens, effectively the distance the subject away from the sensor. And by using that information, you can have much more accurate autofocus. And not only more accurate, but it's able to determine very quickly what direction it needs to move the focusing system in order to bring a subject into focus. With other camcorders, we've been using contrast detect autofocus, which all it can really tell is your subject's out of focus, and then it kind of has to guess, like, okay, do I need to move further, or do I need to move closer on the focus in order to bring the subject into focus. And it also means that it has to continually resample the data coming in at 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second, whatever you're shooting at, in order to determine if the image is in focus. It's slow, it's not accurate, it doesn't work as well as phase detect autofocus. And so the fact that they've added phase detect autofocus to these new cameras is awesome. Combine that with the fact that these cameras, including the X70, however, not including the Z150, have a touch screen, and the touch screen can be put into a mode where it's basically touch to focus. So you tap on the screen, I want this to be in focus. Tap on the screen, I want this to be in focus. And the camera can make a very smooth movement from one focus position to another. Something you can't do with contrast detect AF. And so that's very cool, especially if you're dealing with camera operators who are maybe not as adept at using the focus ring or a focus controller. They're on the side of the camera. And so it's a very cool thing. And it's very highly accurate, it's very fast, it's very smooth. And so that's an absolutely amazing feature that they've added to that. All right, so, okay, the next feature I want to talk about is one that the Z150 does have, the X70 does not. And that is HDR, high dynamic range, through hybrid log gamma, HLG technology. So in brief, HLG is a way of doing high dynamic range that's still more or less backwards compatible with standard dynamic range signaling. So it doesn't require upgrades to your switcher, it doesn't require upgrades to your recorders, anything like that. It's still a signal format that's compatible with equipment that you've already got and displays you've already got. So you can display an HLG image on a standard display and it will look fine. For those who really know their stuff, to be able to detect that the image is a little bit darker overall, but for the most part, it looks okay. Nobody's going to complain about the quality of the image. Whereas the other HDR technologies that are out there, HDR10, Dolby Vision, if they're being processed without having the appropriate flags turned on in order to tell the display, hey, display this using that technology, the images look really weird, overly saturated, way too dark. They look bad. And so HLG is kind of the broadcast industry's way of incorporating HDR into a more traditional workflow without upgrades of all the equipment in between. So the Z90 has that. The Z150 received that in a firmware upgrade this last summer. HLG is backwards compatible enough that I have actually shot a number of events and quite a few of the videos here on this channel using that HLG, and nobody's ever said anything. Nobody ever noticed that it looked any different. So if you go back to some of my videos that I've shot within the last few months, we can look for that and determine which ones of those were actually shot with HLG, and if you have a display compatible with it, maybe you can turn that on and view those in the full HDR. So, cool feature. I really like that they have that. Now, I mentioned a minute ago that this is not a Z90, but it's standing in for one. So the Z90 has the Exmor Rs Sensor, which allows faster readouts. Now, one of the features they've added to that camera that's not available in the Z150 is higher frame rate recording, so up to 960 frames per second. It's at a drastically reduced resolution and only does that for a few seconds, but it does have some higher frame rate. So if you need to capture a brief event and low resolution is okay, maybe that would actually work out all right for you. It doesn't help me with the live production workflow, but it's kind of a cool feature that's in there. Since DJP still does some of the more traditional shoot edit workflow, since we occasionally do that, something like that might actually make some sense. But for live production, that means basically absolutely nothing. Let's see, other things that they've done. They've improved the wireless capabilities in the camera. Oh, another cool one. This is, again, not necessarily something not meaningful for live production workflow, but they've added S-Log 3, S-Gamut 3 to the Z90 as compared to the Z150, which does not have that. Those not familiar with that workflow, it's a workflow where the camera is able to capture a wider range of brightness and a wider range of color and store that in kind of it's a similar file to the standard file, and then those brightness values are processed in post-production. So again, not something you'd use in a live environment, but for those who want to have the most detail in the shadows and the highlights, you can shoot log on these new cameras. Let's see. So those are kind of the highlights. Just briefly talk about a couple of the other ones. So Sony also introduced this one. It's called the HXR NX80, which is more or less the same as the Z90 with a couple of small differences. It does not have the SDI video output. It doesn't have XAVC in its highest quality. It drops the quality of the XAVC video codec down one notch. It also, some of the wireless features are missing. Wireless streaming features are missing. But other than that, it's actually very, very similar. Same sensor, same quality image that you would get out of this camera. If you're working in an environment where you can use or use HDMI instead of SDI, it's probably a camera that's worth considering. Most of the features on the two cameras are identical, so very similar. The price difference, let's see, that one was $2,300. This one's $2,800. So $500 price difference between the two. So if you need to save $500 on that, you certainly can. Again, you're giving up SDI, you're giving up some of the wireless, and you're giving up the XAVC L format. For most people, a lot of those things are going to be fine. If you need to save a little bit of money there. All right, now the last one to take a look at here. This is the Fdr Ax 700, and this is a little more designed a little more for the consumer, but it has a lot of the same features. So it still has your HDR through HLG hybrid log gamma. It still does 4K. Still does your higher frame rate recording, so it has most of those same features. Some of the other things that you lose, though, you lose the XLR audio inputs on the top. It doesn't have the top handle. So, you know, some of the more professional features, but in terms of usability between the cameras, it's actually going to be very similar. Now, with all of that said, do any of these cameras actually make sense for me? Maybe. I'll kind of say it that way. If I was buying an additional camera today, I would probably get one of the Z90s to at least try it out. You know, I bought this X70 as kind of a try it and see if I like it kind of deal, and it turns out that I have really liked it, and I use this thing regularly. And the Z90, I'll probably do the same thing. There's one thing about the Z90 that actually excites me. It's something that one of the quirks about the Z150 they finally fixed in the newer one. On the Z150, if you're shooting 4K, you can only send that 4K video to 2 of 3 outputs. So one of those is recorded on the SD card, one of those is the internal LCD screen, and then the last of those is either the SDI or HDMI output on the back. So you can send it two of the 3. You can't send all 3 at one time. So in terms of live production, what that normally means is I have to turn off the screen, the internal LCD screen. So I can record internally on the camera and send out the HDMI port on the back to go to the switcher, losing the ability to monitor video on the internal LCD. Not a huge deal because we always have external LCDs on the top of the camera, so the camera operator still has a view. However, I can see for some people that can be a real issue. Fortunately, with the Z90 and the other cameras in the lineup, they can record, display on the LCD, and output via the HDMI, or in the case of the Z90, the SDI port, all simultaneously. On a related quirk, the Z150, you can either output SDI or HDMI, but not both at the same time. They've resolved that in the Z90 as well. So, but bottom line is, like, if I was to buy another camera right now, I probably would pick one up. I'm pretty excited about what this camera is. And it's a little smaller, and obviously this is smaller than the bigger Z150s. I'm okay with that, although I know some people like to have the bigger camera in order to look more professional. That's something that's never bothered me much. And once people see the results of my work, they don't care what camera I'm shooting with. Plus, once you take a camera like this and put a big LCD on top and put it on a big tripod, it doesn't look nearly as small and unimpressive as someone might think. So, but I am excited about these cameras. You know, I think that the Z90 is going to be a great camera. If I was to pick up an additional camera right now, I would do that. But as it is right now, I have more cameras than I actually ever use, and so I'm not exactly lacking for additional cameras. And I'm not really sure that with the depreciation of my Z150s, that selling those and buying the Z90 in its place would make a lot of sense. I wouldn't be getting that many more capabilities that I don't already have. So, but again, I think these are great products, and they've definitely. I mean, based on the changes that they're showing here, I think Sony has definitely listened to their customers. So a lot of the complaints about the Z150 have been addressed in this camera. But all in all, though, this is very much a spiritual successor to the Z150 and obviously the X70. And I'm very excited about these cameras. So, if you have questions or comments about these cameras or anything else related to budget video production, be sure and ask those down below in the comment section. I'll try to answer those the best I can. Also, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate anything you guys do to help promote the channel. Speaking of promoting the channel, please consider signing up as a patron on Patreon website. Basically, what you can contribute between $5 and $100 a month towards the channel. That helps to provide funds in order to buy or rent products that we review on the channel. And 100% of the money that's received on Patreon goes directly into reviews for the channel. It does not go into my pocket or into my company. So appreciate any contributions you make there. For those who do make a contribution at the $5 reward level, you get access to some behind the scenes and some additional training videos. I actually am posting more videos over there now than I do on this main public channel. At the $10 level, you get access to once a month Q&A videos. You ask me questions in a live environment. So, and then there are some additional levels as well. I appreciate you guys watching. Appreciate all the support you give for the channel. And if you have questions or comments, be sure and leave those down below. But thanks for watching, and have a great day.